Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive where we're exploring groundbreaking insights from Dr. Alok Aggarwal's book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution and 100 Years of AI. Last time we were really getting into, the massive amount of data you need to train AI, noise-free, of course, and how tricky that whole bias thing can be, especially when you're dealing with areas such as healthcare or loans.
Yeah, those are high-stakes areas for sure.
Totally. So today, we're going to tackle that bias problem head-on, see how to actually deal with it in practice. He's got some really solid strategies for designing AI systems that are, effective but also fair.
Right? Finding that balance is key.
Absolutely. And then we'll jump into this whole mess of data ownership and privacy. Always a fun one, right?
Yeah, always a bit of a minefield.
For sure. And last but not least, we'll explore this idea of synthetic data, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. It could offer a way to get around some of those thorny data issues.
It really could. Dr. Aggarwal has a way of bringing all these complex ideas together in a way that makes you go, aha, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, he's great at connecting the dots.
All right, how about we kick things off by tackling bias mitigation in data?
Let's do it. One of the key takeaways from the book is that, it's all about the human element.
Right? AI systems are built by humans, and humans are inherently biased.
Well, yeah, we all have our own experiences and perspectives that shape our views.
Exactly. So those biases can easily find their way into the technology we create.
Oh, absolutely. That's a key point.
So what's the first step in addressing this?
Well, the book really emphasizes the importance of defining your use case.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
It means being really specific about the problem you're trying to solve with AI and making sure that the data you have actually aligns with that problem.
So you can't just throw any data at an AI and expect it to work magic.
Right? Exactly.
You need to be intentional about it.
The book gives a great example.
Tell me about it.
Imagine you're building an AI to detect vehicles on a highway, right? But the data you have only includes images from daylight hours.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. If you try to train an AI to detect vehicles at night using only daytime data, you're going to run into trouble.
Yeah, you're basically setting it up to fail.
Because it's making assumptions based on incomplete information.
Precisely.
It's like trying to learn how to swim by only watching videos of people floating.
Yeah, good analogy.
You're not going to get the full picture.
Right? So in that case, you'd need to adjust your use case.
Okay, so instead of trying to detect vehicles at all times, you would focus on detecting vehicles during daylight hours.
Exactly.
Makes perfect sense. So defining the use case, making sure your data aligns with it, that's the crucial first step.
It really is.
What else does the book suggest?
Well, it also stresses the importance of incorporating diverse opinions when you're labeling data.
Okay. So why is that so important?
Well, because different people bring different perspectives to the table. Someone from a rural community might interpret data differently from someone from a big city. Or someone with a background in engineering might see patterns that someone with a background in art wouldn't.
That's a great point. So having that variety of viewpoints helps prevent any one bias from dominating the data.
Exactly.
And that leads to a more robust and flexible AI model in the end. The book actually gives this really interesting example of how cultural nuances can come into play.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It talks about how head movements can actually differ across cultures. I never even thought about that.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
But it's so true. Like, if you were training an AI to recognize agreement based solely on head movements, you could end up with an AI that misinterprets agreement in certain cultures.
Right, and that could lead to all sorts of problems.
Absolutely. So diversity in labeling data is key. But it doesn't stop there, does it?
It doesn't.
The book also emphasizes the need to validate those data sets with people from diverse backgrounds as well.
Right. You need that extra layer of checks and balances.
Exactly. To make sure you're not missing any hidden biases. It's all about getting as many perspectives involved as possible.
Exactly.
So we've talked about defining the use case, incorporating diverse opinions, and labeling and validation. What happens once the AI model is actually out there being used?
Well, that's where the continuous feedback loop comes in.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So deploying a model isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning. Real-world user feedback is absolutely crucial for identifying any additional biases or limitations.
Oh, I see. So you're constantly learning and improving based on how the AI is actually being used.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process.
And that feedback can come from a variety of sources, right?
Yes, from users, from experts, from ongoing monitoring of the system.
It's like a never-ending cycle of improvement.
That's a good way to put it.
So to sum it all up, mitigating bias in data is not a one-and-done kind of deal. It's a continuous effort that requires vigilance, proactive strategies, and a commitment to learning and improvement.
Well said.
So we've talked about reducing bias in AI, but it makes you wonder, who's actually in control of all this data in the first place?
Right. Like, who owns it? Whose data is it, really? That's a whole other can of worms, right?
That's a big one. Lots to unpack.
So the book starts off by asking, if you create data, shouldn't it be yours? It seems pretty logical at first, right?
Yeah, you'd think so.
But then it throws in some examples that make you think twice. Like, think about a simple vacation photo.
Okay, yeah.
You're on the beach, you snap a pic of yourself and your, let's say, boyfriend. You own that photo, no question.
Right?
But does that give you the right to share it everywhere online?
I see what you're getting at.
What if he doesn't want his boss to see him chilling on a beach?
Exactly. Suddenly it's not so simple. You own the photo, but all the information in it, especially about someone else, that's where things get fuzzy. And the book takes it even further. Imagine someone's operating say a crane, a big construction crane. The machine's making data about how it's working, but who owns that data? The person running it, or the company that owns the crane itself?
That's a good question. Is it the operator or the company? Gets complicated fast. So even figuring out who made the data in the first place isn't always easy. Then you have to ask what rights come with owning that data, if any.
And the book brings up this case from Belgium, a real story, to show just how tricky it can be. It's the one about the viral video.
Oh yeah, that one where the cyclist has an accident.
Yeah, that's the one. So this cyclist accidentally knocks over a little girl, and her dad happens to be filming. He posts the video online, and of course, it goes viral. The cyclist ends up having to pay damages because they were at fault.
Right.
But then, get this, he sues the father for defamation, and he wins.
Wait, how did the cyclist win? The father took the video. It was his, wasn't it?
Well, the court said even though he owned the video, that didn't mean he could do whatever he wanted with it.
Especially because it affected the cyclist's privacy, right?
Exactly. And it even led to the cyclist getting threats and all sorts of trouble. It really shows how data ownership isn't always so straightforward. You can create something, but your rights to use it aren't limitless, especially when someone else's privacy is at stake.
Makes you think twice about sharing things online, that's for sure.
It definitely does. And all this leads us to something else big in the world of data. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. Have you heard of that?
Oh, GDPR, yeah, I've heard the name. But to be honest, I'm still a bit hazy on what it actually does.
It's a pretty massive deal, actually. Basically, it's all about protecting your personal data.
Okay.
It doesn't come right out and define data ownership, but it puts a lot of emphasis on your right to control what happens to your data. Like you have the right to see your data, to get it corrected if something's wrong, and even to have it completely deleted. That's the right to be forgotten part.
Ah, okay. So GDPR isn't saying who owns the data, but it gives individuals more say in how it's used.
Exactly.
It kind of shifts the power away from companies and governments who used to just do whatever they wanted with our data.
Right? It's a big change.
But this brings up another question then. Does having control over your data automatically mean you own it? And if it does, what are the limits of that control?
Really good questions. They get to the heart of this whole data ownership thing in the age of AI.
It's way more complex than it seemed at first, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. GDPR is a framework, but it's not a perfect answer. There are still lots of gray areas, lots of debate about how to get the balance right between individual rights and the good things that can come from using data, especially with technology.
And then you add AI to the mix.
Oh yeah.
That's a whole other level of complexity on top of everything else.
You're not kidding. And that's actually a perfect place to pick up next. We'll dive deeper into how AI changes the whole game when it comes to data ownership, You're right about AI adding that whole other layer of complexity when it comes to data ownership. One of the big things AI relies on is this idea of informed consent. Basically, it means people should understand how their data is going to be used before they say it's okay to use it.
Informed consent. Yeah, it sounds pretty straightforward. But how does that really work in practice, especially when you throw AI into the mix?
Well, that's where it gets tricky. You see, AI systems, they're always learning, always changing. So how can you really give informed consent for how your data might be used in the future? I mean, even the people who build these systems might not know exactly how that data will be used way down the line.
It's kind of like you're signing a blank check, but you have no clue how much they're going to write on it.
That's a perfect way to put it. It all comes down to trust, right? And then there's this whole black box thing with a lot of AI systems that just makes it even more complicated.
Black box? What do you mean by that?
So imagine this. Even the experts, the ones who build these AI systems, they don't always fully get how they work on the inside. The way AI makes decisions, it can be so complex, so many layers, that it's hard to see through even for the people who created it.
So if the experts don't even get how the AI is using the data, how is anyone supposed to give real informed consent?
That's the big question, isn't it? It shows just how important transparency and explainability are when it comes to AI. If we're going to trust these technologies, we've got to be able to understand how they work, how they're using our data.
And not being transparent like that can have serious real-world consequences, right?
Yeah.
The book actually talks about this case, the Netflix prize fiasco back in 2006. It really shows what can happen.
Oh yeah, that's a classic example. So Netflix, they wanted to make their movie recommendations better. So they offered a prize to anyone who could improve their algorithm. They put out this huge data set of movie ratings, but they were supposed to be anonymous.
Okay.
Problem was some researchers figured out how to de-anonymize the data.
So they could tell who was who, even though it was supposed to be hidden.
Exactly. They could identify individual users just based on what movies they'd watched and how they'd rated them.
So even when you think data's anonymous, it might not be as safe and sound as we think. Kind of scary, actually.
It really shows the limits of trying to hide people's identities and data, especially as AI gets more and more powerful. That whole thing with Netflix, it raised some big red flags about data privacy and how things could go wrong, even when companies are trying to do the right thing.
It makes this idea of data lineage even more important, don't you think? Being able to trace where data came from, its whole history.
Absolutely. If we don't know where data came from, how it's been used, who's had their hands on it, how can we possibly trust anything that comes from it? Any decisions, any insights based on that data?
Can't be reliable, right?
Exactly. Data lineage is all about accountability, transparency, and building trust in these AI systems.
It's like if you're a detective trying to solve a case, you gotta follow the evidence to see the whole picture.
Exactly. That's what data lineage does. It gives you that trail of evidence. You can make sure the data's real, that it's reliable, especially these days with all the fake news and deep fakes going around.
We're basically trying to build a whole new system of rules and ethics for this world that runs on data and AI.
We are. It's really fascinating to watch it all unfold. And the book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution and 100 Years of AI, it suggests this whole process won't be the same everywhere.
What do you mean?
Well, different countries, different cultures, they'll probably come up with different ways of handling data.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
They'll figure out how to balance individual rights with what's good for society, but they might do it in their own way.
So we could end up with like a patchwork of data rules all over the world.
It's definitely a possibility. And that brings up a whole bunch of new questions, new challenges. Like how will companies that work in lots of different countries deal with all these different rules?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Will it make it harder to work together on AI development globally? Could data become something countries use to bargain with each other?
It's a lot to think about. All this just from asking who owns data, it's a lot bigger than it seems at first.
It really is. And that brings us to our next point. Imagine you're building an AI to diagnose skin cancer from photographs.
Okay.
You would need tons of images to train it.
Right.
But getting those images with people's consent, making sure that their privacy is protected, and knowing where each image came from, that's a logistical and ethical nightmare.
It sounds like one, yeah. So it's not just that we need a lot of data, it's that the data itself has to be ethically sourced and handled every step of the way.
It is.
So the mountain of data feels even heavier.
Exactly. And that's where the idea of synthetic data comes in.
Okay, synthetic data, is that like some kind of AI cheat code?
It's kind of like that. Yeah, it's data that's created artificially, specifically designed for a purpose, rather than gathered from real-world events.
So you're saying it's fake data?
Well, it's not necessarily fake. Think of it like a film set.
Okay.
It looks real. It serves its purpose.
Yeah.
But it's not actually a real city.
Okay. So we're talking about simulations.
Yes, and it's not as new as you might think.
Really?
Healthcare and banking have been using synthetic data since the 1990s for things like testing systems and training algorithms without risking real customer data.
Hold on. 1990s, I thought this was cutting-edge stuff.
Well, the roots run deep. There's this fascinating story about a statistician named Donald Rubin.
Okay.
Back in 1993, he synthesized U.S. Census data, which was a precursor to a lot of the techniques we use today.
Okay, so the need for this kind of data isn't new, but the methods for creating it must have come a long way.
Definitely.
So what's the magic behind synthetic data today?
Well, 2 words: AI and ingenuity.
Ingenuity. Okay?
The leading methods are something called generative adversarial networks, or GANs for short.
GANs?
Yes, and diffusion models.
Diffusion models.
Both are kind of like artistic AIs, but with very different approaches.
All right, time to put on our art critic hats. How do these AI Picassos work?
Imagine a painter and a critic, locked in a studio.
Okay.
The painter is our GAN, and it tries to create a masterpiece that will fool the critic. The critic, meanwhile, gets really good at spotting fakes.
So it's like an AI game of can you tell the difference?
Exactly. And with each round, the painter gets better and better at creating something indistinguishable from the real deal. That's how GANs learn to generate synthetic data.
That's wild. What about diffusion models? Are they more like abstract artists?
You could say that, yeah. They start with pure noise, like a chaotic canvas, and then they slowly refine it, adding details until a recognizable image emerges, like a sculptor chipping away at a block of marble to reveal the statue within.
So they're more about gradually bringing order to chaos. Interesting.
Yeah.
But are they as good as GANs at creating believable data?
Initially, they lag behind in accuracy, but they've caught up remarkably. In some tasks, they even outperform GANs.
Wow. The underdog comes out on top. Any famous diffusion model creations we might have seen?
Oh, tons. DALL-E 2, Mid-Journey Stable Diffusion.
Right.
These are the rock stars of text-to-image generation.
Those are the ones that are blowing up the internet.
Exactly.
Those mind-bending images.
Yeah.
So synthetic data isn't just about mimicking existing data. It can create entirely new stuff based on our instructions.
It can.
That's powerful.
It is. And this power has huge implications for AI training.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to those data facets we talked about earlier.
Okay, let's bring it back to those facets.
Right?
How does synthetic data help us navigate the ethical and practical headaches of using real-world data?
Well, imagine you're a healthcare company trying to train an AI to diagnose a rare disease. You need tons of patient data, which is incredibly sensitive and hard to come by.
Right. You can't just go asking people for their medical records.
Exactly. But what if you could create synthetic data that captures the key characteristics of the disease without containing any actual patient information?
That would be a game changer. You could train the AI without putting anyone's privacy at risk.
Exactly. It's like building a medical simulator that allows doctors to practice complex procedures without operating on a real person.
So synthetic data is like the ultimate AI training ground. A safe space to push boundaries without the ethical and logistical baggage.
It is. And this approach can be applied to countless other fields, from finance to self-driving cars, anywhere where data is sensitive, scarce, or difficult to collect.
It's incredible. It sounds like synthetic data is a potential silver bullet for some of the biggest challenges facing AI development.
It certainly has the potential, but with any powerful tool, there are limitations and challenges to consider.
Oh, of course.
And that's what we'll delve into next.
That's right. No technology is perfect.
Yeah.
And synthetic data, while promising, is no exception.
One of the biggest hurdles is making sure that synthetic data really reflects all the little details of the real world.
Yeah, because if you're training AI on data that's oversimplified or skewed in some way, the AI isn't going to be prepared for the messy reality it's supposed to operate in.
Exactly. It's like teaching someone to drive using only a video game.
Oh, okay.
They might ace the virtual course, but put them on a real road with real traffic, and it's a totally different story.
Yeah, totally. How do we make sure our synthetic data is up to snuff? How do we know it's a good enough stand-in for the real deal?
That's where rigorous testing and evaluation come in. We need to hold synthetic data to the same standards, if not higher, as real data.
Okay.
We need to check for biases, make sure it captures the full range of possible scenarios, and constantly refine the generation process.
So it's not just about creating synthetic data, it's about creating good synthetic data.
Yeah,
Data that we can trust to train AI responsibly.
exactly. And this brings us back to our earlier discussion about removing bias from data.
Remember, bias can creep in even with the best intentions.
Yeah,
So we need to be extra careful when working with synthetic data.
because if the algorithms generating the synthetic data are biased, then the data will be biased, and that's just going to get amplified when we use it to train AI.
Exactly,
It's like a chain reaction of bad information.
right? And that's why this whole conversation about data, AI, and ethics is so important. We need to think about the big picture,
Right?
about the impact of our choices on individuals and society.
It's a lot of responsibility, but it's also pretty exciting.
It is.
I mean, we're talking about shaping the future of technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And, one of the most exciting things about synthetic data is its potential to democratize AI development.
democratize. What do you mean by that?
Well, right now, access to large, high-quality data sets is often limited to big tech companies and research institutions.
Okay,
But synthetic data could level the playing field, allowing smaller companies, startups, even individual researchers to develop and test AI models.
without needing access to those massive real-world datasets.
So it's like giving everyone the tools to participate in the AI revolution, not just the people with the deepest pockets.
Exactly. And that could lead to an explosion of innovation, with new applications and solutions coming from all over the world.
That's an amazing thought.
Yeah,
But let's not forget about the potential downsides. Is there a risk that synthetic data could be used for malicious purposes?
there's always that risk. Like any powerful tool, synthetic data can be misused.
Right?
One worry is the creation of incredibly convincing deepfakes.
Oh, yeah.
Videos or audio that seem real, but are completely fabricated.
Those are already causing a lot of trouble, making it hard to know what's real and what's not. I can only imagine how much worse it'll get with synthetic data.
Exactly. And this raises serious questions about how we verify information, how we can trust anything in a world where anything can be faked.
It's almost like we need a whole new set of skills, like digital literacy, to figure out what we see online and not take things at face value.
Absolutely. And this is where the conversation about synthetic data connects with other issues, like the need for explainable AI.
Explainable AI.
Yes, because even if we create realistic synthetic data, it's important to understand how AI is processing that data and how it's arriving at its conclusion.
We don't want to just blindly trust AI, especially as it gets more powerful.
Right?
We need to understand the reasons behind its decisions.
Exactly. And that's why explainable AI is so important. It's not just about making AI more transparent, but also making it accountable and trustworthy.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into synthetic data, what's the most important takeaway?
The key point is that synthetic data offers a powerful way to overcome some of the limitations and ethical challenges of real-world data. It can accelerate AI development in so many fields, from healthcare to transportation,
Right?
while respecting privacy and other values. But it's not perfect. We need to be aware of its limitations. Watch out for potential biases and always strive for transparency and explainability in our AI systems.
Yeah.
We need to be thinking about what it means to have this increasingly sophisticated AI, especially when it comes to trust and accountability.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just about what AI can do, but how this technology is going to change the world, our relationships, and even what it means to be human.
Exactly. And those are really big questions that go way beyond just computer science.
Yeah.
We need philosophers, ethicists, sociologists, artists, everyone, to think about how we navigate this uncharted territory.
It's almost like we're writing a new chapter in human history.
We are.
And the ink isn't even dry yet. But the choices we make today about AI are going to have ripple effects for generations.
Yeah, that's true. So speaking of choices, let's get back to the main themes we've been discussing in this deep dive.
You mean the challenges of using data the right way to train AI systems?
Exactly. We started by talking about getting rid of bias in data, which is a huge task on its own.
Right.
Then we looked at all the complicated issues around ownership, consent, privacy, security, and all that.
Right. All those facets of data that we forget about sometimes, but that are so important when we're building ethical and trustworthy AI.
Exactly. And then we talked about the idea of synthetic data, which might solve some of those problems, but it also brings its own set of complications.
It's like we're peeling back layers of an onion, and each layer has its own new insights and challenges.
Yeah.
But it's a journey we have to take if we want to build an AI-powered future that's good for everyone.
Absolutely. And as we've seen, all of these layers are connected. They're all part of this bigger goal to create AI systems that aren't just powerful and effective, but also ethical, transparent, and accountable.
And that's where explainable AI comes in. Because even if we could create perfect data and train really smart AI models, it doesn't matter if we don't know how those models are making their decisions.
Exactly. Explainable AI is essential if we want people to trust AI and to make sure it's being used in a way that aligns with our values. It's about being able to see what's going on inside.
Right? Because blindly trusting AI is not a good idea, especially when those AI systems are making big decisions that affect our lives.
I agree completely. And that's exactly what our next deep dive will focus on.
This idea of explainable AI.
Yes. We'll explore the reasons behind this black box problem, why it's so hard to understand how complex AI models work, and why this matters so much.
What kind of things will we be looking at?
We'll be diving into some of the ways that people are trying to interpret AI models, trying to figure out the logic and patterns that AI uses to make decisions.
Okay.
We'll also talk about why, even with these techniques, it's still incredibly difficult to really know what's happening inside these black boxes.
This is going to be tough, but it sounds fascinating. Is there anything else you want to tease our listeners with for next time? Something to really get them thinking?
Yes. One more thing we'll touch on is this really tricky idea of causality.
Causality.
Related to AI.
Okay.
Just because an AI can predict something, let's say that someone's likely to click on an ad, doesn't mean it understands why.
Oh, so it's like correlation versus causation, but for AI, that's definitely something to think about. I can see how that could lead to all sorts of misunderstandings and maybe even harmful uses.
Exactly. If you're ready to go deeper into the world of AI, join us next time as we crack open the black box and wrestle with the challenge of explainability.
It's going to be a mind-bending journey.
It will be.
Until then, keep those brains buzzing.
See you next time.